Deconversion Part 2. I'm kind of pick up where I left off, which was the trouble I was causing at the church. I'm not going to go into much detail about that, it's not really important. But basically I went from the church, kind of looking for something different, stopped going to church. Ended up finding a teacher in grade 8 who was a very unique individual, a very Orwellian man, a musician as well. His favourite song was Copperhead Road. He ended up teaching us a class which was a combination of history, social studies, economics, I said history, didn't I? And social implications upon society. And we did a religious studies class. It was about a month of studying and then a presentation done by every individual in the class. There was Hinduism presented, Muslim, 3 sects of Christianity, Wicca, Sikhism. There was something else in there, another 2 in there. Oh, Judaism was one of them, and what was the other one? Buddhism. Buddhism was the 3rd. Ironically, the one that I forget is the one that I actually bothered caring about. Listening to them all, I found a lot of similarities between a lot of the major ones and a lot of similarities between some of the lesser ones in just kind of the general presentation that they would have given to us at the point in time. At that point in time, I was kind of seeking out a new path in life, shall we say. And the 2 that sort of appealed to me was Buddhism and Wicca/paganism. Now, the Wiccan/paganism that was presented to us was a druid, a practicing druid, and a practicing Wiccan, and they kind of both did a conjoined presentation. And then the Buddhist presentation was very weak, to say the least, but they had some interesting valid points in there that at that point in time in my life I was actually kind of interested in. So I went and studied that for a while, and I ended up talking to a couple of guys from China who were over on an exchange program, and the concept of Buddhism basically got dashed out after that conversation. The dynamic opposition that I had with these 2 individuals was so dramatic that I just could not bring myself to believe the bullshit that they were spewing. So I went and studied paganism for a while. My paganism studies, oh, that's a bloody well joke. I started off by reading books, and the books has some very valid things to me personally. But I also found that there was a lot of things in there that I just kind of discarded instantaneously. It was really funny. The whole concept of rituals and prayer, and the fact that they would call it spells, and when you actually look at what they were prayer. And again, it was this conflict inside of me that I kind of looked at both sides and I kind of went, well, what's the point in this when I just got away from it in this? And so I was having very diametrically opposed conflicts with myself at that point in time. Well, I found a group of pagans that I eventually hooked up with after about 2.5 years of reading and studying and trying to understand all this. The group gave me quite the education on what paganism is and isn't. Let's put it to you this way, they were a group of swingers who pretended to be pagans. And the fact that they were swingers doesn't bother me, the fact that they're pagan doesn't bother me. The fact that they used paganism as an excuse for the swinging bothered me, personally. As I said, I don't have a problem with either one, but when you use one as an excuse for the other, I find a problem with that. The fact that you're a swinger, I think it's perfectly fine, go ahead, be a swinger. The fact that you're a pagan is perfectly fine, be a pagan. The fact that you're a swinging pagan is perfectly fine. But to try and hide the fact as an excuse for something else is, well, personally frustrating to me. And ultimately, by the end of it, I found out that the 9 other people that I was involved with, 8 of them were sleeping together and having a good old romping time with each other. The other person was kind of just like me, being dragged along through the mud through this whole situation. So I very carefully divulged who was sleeping with who to everybody and walked out the door. The group, about a year later, broke itself apart and kind of fell apart. A while later I hooked up with another group of pagans, and I ended up in a conversation with one, and the person asked me point blank what I saw in them, and I asked them if they honestly want to know the answer, and they said yes. Well, I told them point blank that I saw a weakness in them simply because they were becoming what they hated most, which was their mother. Their mother gave up everything, her mother, from what I had understood and what I had been told, and I had met the woman myself, honestly, had given up everything in her life to become a mother. She had sacrificed everything she had to be a mother. Now, I'm not opposed to that per se, but the fact that this woman was highly educated, she was a lawyer, she had a doctorate in, I think it was English studies or something else, she had basically 2 different degrees, and she was a lawyer, a criminal defense lawyer, and I think it was a doctorate in English or something. She was an absolutely brilliant woman, absolutely brilliant, but she gave all of that up, all that education, all that potential up, just to simply become a mother. Not that I'm opposed to that concept, but what I'm opposed to in this story, and what kind of revolves back around to the original conversation, is the fact that this woman resented her own daughter for her giving up everything that she gave up. She resented her own daughter for her choices. And that part pissed me off about this woman. And I saw her daughter doing the exact same things that her mother had done. It was basically the concept of kill your parents to become your parents. Well, this woman asked me what I saw, and I told her that I saw a weakness in her, that she was becoming a mother. And she didn't let me finish. She just got all in a huff and basically threw me out of the house, which I found absolutely hilarious. And her husband found me so offensive and all this other crap. And, well, you know what? I personally didn't care that I was thrown out and I was banned and discommunicated with and everything else. I personally found that part hilarious. The fact that I found annoying is the fact that I was trying to educate and trying to help the woman out, and she only ever heard what she wanted to hear out of my conversation with her. Now, maybe I was wrong in the way I presented it to her. Probably I am totally wrong in the way I presented it to her. But hey, I did what I did. Well, at that point I basically walked out on paganism as well. Actually, not quite. There was something else that happened before that. I was having a conversation with the person that had brought me back into that group originally, after I had basically been thrown out / walked out on them. And we were having a conversation, and she was giving me hell about the way I had presented my argument and everything else, saying that she was overly sensitive and all this other crap. And I looked at her point blankly and said, I asked her if she wanted me to tell her the truth. I asked her twice, and she said yes both times. And I'm like, she should have understood by the time, the amount that she had dealt with me, that if you ask me for the truth, and I ask you, do you really want to hear the truth, it probably means I'm going to tell you an answer you really don't want to hear, but I'm going to give you my honest opinion no matter what. Well, needless to say, that kind of ended up in another conversation that we're not going to touch, but she ultimately called me something which I found kind of funny, which was a chaos maid. And I kind of laughed at the whole situation. I went and looked it up, and I sort of dissolved the concept and kind of walked back to her a while later and said, no, there's no way in hell I'm one. And she goes, why is that? I'm like, because I'm not a mathematical nut who believes the stars have all the answers. And she kind of looks at me and goes, that only proves the point. And I kind of left it at that. At which point I basically gave up on religion in general and just kind of decided, hey, I'm human. I have some semi-bizarre beliefs. I have had some semi-bizarre experiences in my life. But to be honest with you, I don't need religion. I don't need spirituality. I don't need all this other crap. And it kind of led me into this cycle of, am I atheist, am I agnostic, am I pagan, and just what am I? And I kind of came to the conclusion that I'm none of them, I'm all of them. And I would rather have evidence provided to me, but I still have this hang-up. I've never quite gotten over the hang-up of, is there something out there, which came to be the concept of energy, which was presented to me in science class. Energy is neither created nor destroyed, only changes form, that we found in the physics class, and that kind of solidified my one concept and idea that if God exists, it would be an energy mass, whether it's planetary or universal or just what. About the same time, I caught into watching Final Fantasy The Spirits Within, and that kind of energized the concept of thought in my head. And I went back and I watched the original 3 Star Wars, and I watched, I think only the first 2 were out at that point, The Phantom Menace and Clone Wars. But what happened in that kind of stage and point in my life is the fact that I saw that other people could see the possibility of this concept existing in a much more fantasy way than I was looking at or approaching it at the time. So I kind of came to the conclusion roughly that if there is something out there like that, it doesn't care. It's just kind of floating around or whatever. And if it did, well, it would take one look at planet Earth and go, fuck it, the experiment's screwed, just wipe them out, start over. So that was kind of the conclusion on that one in a rough sense.